This is the start of our journey today. We have a little bit of a climb up this hill, and I was going to use my drone to use the follow mode to give you guys that perspective, but there's a tourist attraction right behind me, and there is a bunch of no drone signs everywhere. And I don't want to give off, the wrong impression and someone gets super sensitive and decides to take out a gun and shoot my drone down, which I don't think that would happen, but you never know. Over here is the little town of Jerome, and then over in the distance here we have what's called Verde Valley. You can kind of see Sedona in the distance way back there, and it's a little overcasty today, but you can see Humphreys Peak in the distance, also known as the San Francisco Peaks. Has an elevation of about 12,600 feet, and it's actually the tallest point in Arizona. Once I was far enough away from the tourist attraction, I was able to successfully launch my drone and set it to follow mode. I did capture a little snippet of that tourist attraction here, and it is called Gold King Mine and Ghost Town. I did feature it in one of my previous videos, which I will have linked down in the description. And hey, if you're out in these parts and you're into old vintage stuff, it's worth paying the $12 to get in. Take your time looking around at all the old cars, buildings, and displays. But let's keep on cruising. Now it is a 17-mile drive to our destination, and typically when I make videos like this, I like to pull up YouTube and watch as many videos on the subject as I can, just to kind of get an idea of what to expect. But this time around, I didn't do that. I wanted to have that sense of enjoyment and really dial in the curiosity of not knowing what was behind every corner. I was a little hesitant in the beginning because I was greeted with the primitive road sign at the start of our drive. That, along with sharp curves and steep drop-offs with nothing to prevent you from going over the edge. Was I worried? No. Was I alert? Yes. As beautiful as it was to gaze across the horizon at these lush green rolling hills at the base of the Mingus Mountains, raw beauty like this in remote parts of Arizona does come with certain risks. If you do happen to find yourself driving over the edge like the O'Doyles and Billy Madison, it's not a straight drop down as you can see here, but if you did go over, your car could end up rolling all the way down to the bottom of the valley, and in an area where cell service is about as reliable as a career politician, if someone didn't see you go over, no one would even know you're down there. So far, it's been a pretty exhilarating ride. I am not hating these views, but it's also a drive that requires a lot of attention and focus, because if we go over the edge, we ain't coming back up. Well, we are coming back up, but probably in a body bag. I'm just kind of hoping I can find a place to pull over here so I can fly my drone around the hills and see if we can find any wildlife, maybe car wrecks, any old mines. Probably not the best place to park coming around a sharp curve, but then again, this also looks like an ideal place where some idiot who's gung-ho in a Honda Civic probably took that turn coming too quickly. So I'm gonna fly my drone around here, see if I can find some car wrecks, and just see if we can find anything else hiding out in these hills. Oh, geez! The remainder of the drive coming out of the mountains was pretty eventful for a couple reasons. One, I got to test out my new drone's feature called Active Track, which is what allows the drone to follow my vehicle, or should I say, rental vehicle. It did keep up comfortably when I was driving around speeds of 25 miles per hour. And second, the color throughout the drive was immensely captivating. The clouds were coming and going, but there were a few moments when the sun peeked through, allowing a nice pleasant shine on the hills. Now, this area has also been getting a fair amount of rain over the past few weeks, allowing vegetation to flourish. And finally, there's just something about that red rock and dirt that makes it so hard to look away. It sticks out so much, and from the perspective of a drone, it creates a stark contrast between the green hills and the blue sky. Well, we have quite literally come to a fork in the road. And the only problem with this is I don't know if we go down that road or if we go down this road. My gut is telling me to just keep going straight because this one says 1-lane road, blind curves next 7 miles. And this just doesn't look like the road that's going to take us to where I want to go. Service out here has been a little spotty. In some areas I was getting cell service and in other areas I wasn't. I just got a feeling it's this one. And if it's not, well, then we are going to waste a bunch of time, but gotta take a chance. At this point in our journey, I really put a lot of faith in the decision that I made, hoping for the best. Worst case scenario, I would have to double back and end up wasting about a half hour. Now, the only problem with that is, it was a time-sensitive shoot and there was about a 20% chance of rain in the forecast, as I'm sure you could tell by the abundance of clouds. It is monsoon season here in Arizona, and the weather up in the higher elevations can change on a whim. Now, it's not the end of the world when you're filming on a handheld camera, but when a drone is your most prominent tool used in production to help hone in on those cinematic shots, let's just say this, I was starting to get a little anxious. Luckily for me, after a few minutes of a nail-biting drive, I eventually saw a sign that said, 2 miles until my destination. I instantly let out a huge sigh of relief and cracked open a Dr. Pepper. Soon after that, I had finally arrived at the first of many things I set out to investigate. Bullet holes through a sign. That's not surprising. The Perkinsville Bridge has a rather interesting backstory. According to livingnewdeal.org, the Perkinsville Bridge was built in 1936 by the Arizona Highways Department using relief workers hired out of transient camps along the Verde River. Here's an old photo of the bridge that I was able to pull from that same website. Now here's what makes its backstory so interesting. The Perkinsville Bridge wasn't built. Well, I guess technically speaking, it was at one point in time because it didn't build itself. But what I mean is, it wasn't built for this specific purpose. The Perkinsville Bridge was built in 1913, but it was originally located on the San Carlos Indian Reservation near Calva, Arizona, where it crossed the Gila River. A couple years later, that bridge suffered flood damage, making it impassable. It was eventually reopened 6 years later in 1921, but by 1936 the decision was made to replace the bridge altogether. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any old photos of this bridge, but let's face it, it was the early 1900s and not everyone had a camera. 3 of the bridge's 7 spans ended up being salvaged. One span ended up being sent northwest of Prescott, Arizona, some 33 miles, and it is now known as Walnut Creek Bridge. And of course, the remaining 2 spans are now what make up the Perkinsville Bridge. Fun fact about these 2 bridges. According to livingnewdeal.org, the 2 structures have since functioned unaltered at these relatively remote forest crossings. Even though these bridges were established in 1936, they were both a part of a much bigger bridge that was originally built in 1913. Meaning, both of these bridges, as of this video being made, are 112 years old, and they're still holding up strong. Before heading out to the next historical location, I wanted to spend a few minutes hiking around the Verde River in hopes that I would spot a river otter. And yes, there are otters in Arizona. I always bring my telephoto lens with me anytime I'm near the Verde River, in the off chance that I spot one and I'm quick enough to snap a photo. But unfortunately, a couple of vehicles showed up and some families got out with their kids and dogs and decided it would be a great time to take a dip in the Verde River and ruin my afternoon. I'm only kidding. As always, I didn't want to make them feel uncomfortable as I was walking around with my camera and drone, so I let them enjoy their outing. There's always going to be another time to come out to the Verde River and spot otters. And for those of you who didn't know, Arizona used to have a thriving river otter population up until the early 1900s. Historically, they could be found in the Salt, Verde, Gila, and Colorado River. But unfortunately, they were wiped out in the late 1800s as settlers started moving into the area. Their habitats were destroyed, ecosystems disrupted due to water diversion, and sadly, many of them were hunted for their thick fur coats. This eventually led to the extinction of the Sonoran River otter. Now let's fast forward to a time when ripped jeans, hair metal, jerry curls, and spandex were in style. I'm talking about the 80s. In the years of 1981 to 1983, a species of otter from Louisiana was introduced back into the Verde River. Fast forward to today, and there is a healthy river otter population. They're primarily found in the Verde River and its surrounding watershed, including Oak Creek, Sycamore Canyon, and Clear Creek. They've also been spotted in the Salt River, including the area near the confluence with the Gila River. But you guys let me know down in the comments if you've ever seen a river otter in Arizona. As I always do, before I come out to places like this, I always try to do as much research as I can, so that way I know how far I can go and how far I can't go, and when I need to use the drone. And a few videos on YouTube showed that I guess you can drive all the way back to this abandoned train station, which is ideally what I would love to explore, but then other videos showed you can't because the road's blocked, and you can hike all the way up there, but then other videos said you can't even hike there because it's on private property. So who the F knows? But there's a road right here. We're gonna see how far it goes, and if we can take it, awesome, and if we can't, then we'll go with plan B. That's a good sign. There's an arrow pointing toward this way. But can we go there? No! No, 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 no! Let's get out and see what this entails. This area closed to 4x4, dirt bikes, and ATVs. This was definitely an unexpected setback, but I wasn't ready to give up that easy. I probably could have hiked out there, but that would have burned up way too much time. Instead, I drove a little further up the hill, found a good place to launch my drone, and this is what I saw next. Welcome to the little ghost town of Perkinsville, Arizona, if you want to call it a ghost town. What was once a bustling little town out in the remote desert filled with hopes and dreams has now been reduced to a few dilapidated buildings and random junk scattered throughout the land. But what it lacks in size, it makes up for in history. It all started back in 1900 when a man by the name of Marion Alexander Perkins, his wife Annie, and their 6 children moved to Arizona from Texas to establish a cattle ranch. Wow, talk about a real-life Brady Bunch, minus the maid. Quick backstory. Prior to the Perkins family arrival in 1900, the area was known as the Verde Ranch. You see, back in the 1860s, an army doctor by the name of James Baker traded his horse along with the saddle to a squatter for his land claims along the Verde River. Mr. Baker and his partner, James Campbell, were soon running one of the largest cattle/horse operations in Arizona. But this was very short-lived. Severe drought came upon them in the 1890s, causing great financial setback. The partners were eventually forced to sell. It was at this point that Marion Perkins caught wind of the ranch being on the market and was informed about the open range and year-round stream. He couldn't pass this up. Eventually they struck a deal and he purchased the ranch. In the early 1900s, the copper mining population around the area was booming. The Perkins Ranch regularly sold slaughtered beef to feed the miners in the nearby town of Jerome, Arizona. And in the years to come, Perkinsville would see small but mighty growth. In 1912, a railway financed by William A. Clark was put in, connecting Perkinsville to the nearby town of Clarkdale. This was done to help service Mr. Clark's copper smelter in Clarkdale, along with his copper mine in Jerome. The railway ended up cutting right through the Perkins Ranch, and not too long after it was created, the railroad put in several buildings, including a train station, a water tower for the steam trains, and a house for the station master. Most importantly, according to la.charlottehallmuseum.org, the little depot constructed near the ranch headquarters was named Perkinsville. For a brief period of time in the early 1900s, about 10 to 12 families lived in Perkinsville. It was becoming a bustling little community, and eventually they had a small school put in, along with a general store, housing for the railroad workers, and a post office. The building I'm showing you now is the old cowboy bunkhouse. I couldn't find a whole lot of information on it, but you know what? For being built in the early 1900s, it's still holding up strong. The roof looks like it's in great shape, and the side facing the railroad doesn't look bad either. It wouldn't surprise me if whoever owns this is still using it for storage, because it definitely looks like somebody is taking care of it. And here we have the old train station. I really dig the colors and that old vintage look. If this building could talk, I'm sure it could tell us some amazing stories. This one definitely looks a little bit more rough compared to the bunkhouse, but hey, it's still standing. You can kind of see where the platform in front of the building used to come out to. Here's an old photo of the train station that I found online. And here's what it looks like as of today. I flew my drone behind the train station, and there was a lot going on. The first thing I noticed was the skull hanging above the door. It doesn't get more Wild West than that. There was also a couple old safes, an oil drum, and a work table with what appears to be a few stones and a sling hook laying upon it. When I got home and started searching for old photos of Perkinsville, I discovered that there used to be another building here. I found this photo on alarmy.com, and the description of the photo said that it was taken back in 2006. And it looks like it was in pretty good shape, too, for that time. Makes me kind of wonder what happened to it or why they decided to tear it down. Before we get to the downfall of the town, there is one key detail about this historic town that is worth mentioning, because it wouldn't be a complete Perkinsville, Arizona video without it. Perkinsville, Arizona was also featured in a popular 1962 movie called How the West Was Won, and what I'm going to do now is play a few snippets of that movie and try to line up these scenes with the photos that I took. I will be completely honest here, I have not seen this movie yet, but I am going to make it my personal mission to watch it this weekend. It's also worth mentioning that this was the old water tower that was used for the steam locomotives. I thought this next part was pretty interesting. On the website, lsfprice.blogspot.com, I will link that down in the description, they mention that the water tower was blown up in a scene for that very same movie, but unfortunately, that scene was cut from the film. Now for the million-dollar question. How did Perkinsville go from becoming a busy little town to nothing but a few old buildings that are barely hanging on? Well, it all started in the 1950s. You see, close to Perkinsville was a limestone quarry and kiln for producing lime that was used at the Clarkdale smelter. I can only assume that this was the nearby quarry and kiln that the websites were talking about. I apologize if I'm wrong on that, but I couldn't find any other information that dictated otherwise. Now, in the early 1950s, the copper factory located in Clarkdale closed down, which meant that they no longer needed the kiln or the limestone quarry in Perkinsville. On top of that, diesel trains were becoming more popular and they did not require water stops like the old steam trains did.
As a result of those changes, most people moved away, and Perkinsville quickly became a ghost town. When I was here, I did see something poking around the old train station, which I'll show you in a moment, but I would also like to reiterate that this is private property and it is still a functioning ranch, so don't get any stupid ideas. As I was wrapping up my last few shots for the day and getting ready to bring my drone back, I saw something creeping out from under a tree. It turned out to be a little deer. I kept my distance with the drone because I didn't want the buzzing to scare it off, so I utilized the zoom feature to get a closer look. He was probably just being curious and checking out the area, or maybe he was looking for scraps of food that fell off the Verde Canyon scenic train ride when it came through, which is something I've been contemplating on making a video on. And hey, if you're not ready for the fun to end just yet, make sure you click the playlist in the upper left-hand corner to see more of my desert exploration videos.